bubble is about to burst because for the first time in last 112 years, the Federal Reserve is under criminal investigation. But the Fed Chairman says this is a threat of criminal charges to pressure Fed because the Federal Reserve is not setting interest rate on the preferences of President Trump.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
And the same situation happened in Turkey in 2022, which pushed their country inflation to 84%. But is there possibility of happening collapse like this in America? And what are the criminal charges against the Federal Reserve Chairman? And what does this mean for Bitcoin and stock market? Because this Fed bubble could trigger the biggest and worst economical crisis in American history. So now let's dive in from where this all started. But before that, please read full legal disclaimer in description box. On January 11th, Federal Reserve had released approx 2 minutes of video on their official website in which Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said that they had been threatened by criminal charges by Department of Justice.
On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June.
Because on 24th of June 2025 in Testimony House, he gave his official statement about $2.5 billion of budget to renovate all Federal Reserve building. But this building renovation is not a reason why the criminal charges were filed against him. The real reason is $2.5 billion of budget in which $700 million was extra expended. Therefore, media reports started coming out that Fed Chairman is spending unnecessary money on luxury while renovating building. But in June in Testimony House, he said that building being renovated does not have any extra luxury. There is no any VIP rooms, there is no new marble being used, they are using old marble, and he called all these media reports misleading and inaccurate. But this $700 million of over budget grabbed the attention of Department of Justice, which resulted into the criminal charges. But on this, Jerome Powell said on 11th of January 2026 that Fed made every effort to keep Congress informed about regarding the renovation project, and this threat is not because the building renovation is over budget. This is being done to increase pressure on Fed because he is not following the preferences of President Trump to set interest rate.
This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
Therefore, we find several videos and tweets in which President Trump keeps saying that he will fire Fed Chairman because he is not cutting interest rate. But the Fed, which is the Central Bank of United States, is an independent organization, and country economy mostly depend on how independent this organization is. And if they are getting influenced by any political party, then this can turn American economy to a big disaster. And this has already been proven in Turkey in 2022. Turkey's central bank was influenced by their political leaders and was told to reduce interest rate, saying inflation will automatically decrease because their president believed that lower interest rate means lower inflation. And during that time, inflation was at 16%. But when they kept reducing interest rate under political influence without considering inflation real data, then by November 2022, inflation in their country had increased to 84%. And this simply means that their currency was getting weaker by 84% each year. But is this kind of disaster really possible in America? Maybe you won't like this answer, but unfortunately the answer is yes. But to stop this, Fed Chairman asked one question with people of America.
This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
And soon after this video, every living former Fed chairman and several former Treasury secretaries signed a statement on Monday in support of Fed independence, and this group of 13 signatories told that the Department of Justice is trying to weaken the independence of Fed. They also said that there is no place for political pressure in America, whose greatest strength is rule of law, which is the foundation of our economical success. And at the same time, several Republican lawmakers, including 3 senators, raised their voice in support of Mr. Powell. But even after this much support, whether the Fed bubble will burst or not, and whether this will be a disaster for America or not, this all will largely depend on President Trump's decision, because Trump always wanted lower interest rate, but Jerome Powell has not followed Trump preferences, and that is why he always remain angry with Powell. Therefore, there is also a possibility that Trump will use these criminal charges as a justification to remove Powell as a Fed chairman, in the same way in which he tried to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook, citing allegation of mortgage fraud in last year. But if Trump succeed in this and remove Powell and bring new Fed chairman, and if he cut interest rate under political influence, then this Fed bubble will start getting bigger. Then the same thing will happen with America that happened with Turkey. Because if interest rate remains low, then people will take more loans and they will invest in Bitcoin stocks to earn higher profit, due to which the prices of Bitcoin and stock will increase rapidly. And if Fed remain under this political pressure for longer period of time, ignoring the actual country situation like inflation, then this high price of Fed bubble will become so big that whenever Trump administration will end and next president will come to power and the Fed get its independence back, then whenever they will release the correct inflation and interest rate data, then this high price Fed bubble will burst and it will shake whole American economy with stocks, Bitcoin and dollar dominance. And due to decrease in dollar dominance, investment will start going out of United States, and their rivals country like China and Russia will get chance to get ahead of America. But this was just an imagination of what could happen in a specific case, but it has not happened yet. But what is happening right now is extremely important for you to know, because this is directly linked to you and your investment. On January 13, CPI data came out, which was lower than last month, from which we can measure inflation. There are also some other parameters to measure this inflation, but from this core CPI data, experts also understand that inflation is decreasing in country, which means Fed has to cut interest rate. Based on this, Trump tweeted and said that Jerome Powell will have to cut interest rate now. And logically, Trump is not wrong here, but there is very big problem in cutting interest rate right now, which I will tell you in a minute. So according to CPI data which came out, the chances of rate cuts should increase in January, right? But due to this criminal investigation news came out, the chances of interest rate cut has dropped from 25% to 4% in January. And due to this, Bank of America, Global Central Bank Unity and BNY Mellon started to warn that pressure on Fed could slow the rate cut. But who is really behind creating this economical disaster for America? Whether he is Jerome Powell, who is not cutting interest rate, or Trump, who want to get interest rate reduced, this will become clear to you with an example. Assume that you got a fever and doctor gave you medicine of 6 doses, but after taking 2 doses you started feeling better. So will you stop taking remaining 4 doses? Probably no, right? Because if you stop taking remaining doses, then there will be a chances that fever can come back again. And same things follows for interest rate. If inflation is coming down in a country, then Fed examines the data and pattern. Then they decide to cut interest rate, because if they don't do that and cut rates, then in next month, if there might be a slightly increase in inflation, then they have to again increase the interest rate to deal with that. And this will bring uncertainty in a country about what could happen next month, whether the interest rate is going higher or lower. And only thing which investor hate is uncertainty in any country. Therefore, to grow any country, there must be a stable interest rate and controlled inflation. Only then more foreign investors will come and invest in that country. And I'm not saying who is right or wrong here. I am talking about the common American people and investor, because political leaders will keep coming and going. But if someone pressure the Fed to set interest rate according to them, just to give short-term growth to country, Bitcoin stocks, to make people happy, but once their political term in, then that pressure bubble on Fed will burst and it will push entire economy, Bitcoin stock, to a disaster. And this will give long-term pain than any short-term pain to the people of that country. What do you think about this? Please comment down below. But if you really found this video helpful, go and watch this video where you will understand why dollar failed in Venezuela.